It's Wednesday. We made it. Hump day, everyone. Thank you for being with us on the Oakland County Megacast. I'm Ronnie Dahl alongside Tyler Keefe, the one, the only Tyler Keefe. Tyler, don't you like how I introduce you?
Oh, it's great. It's fantastic.
He really is. Tyler, I'm going to toot your horn. I do it every day. But Tyler is like a one-man machine here at Civic Center TV, dedicated to the people within Oakland County. What time did you get out of here last night?
About 9:15 p.m.
So Tyler doesn't only participate in the Megacast and getting this on the air and doing the research and helping us with the rundown and all of that good stuff. He also navigates the behind-the-scenes needs and desires to be able to get our public access stations up and running. And last night was the Kegel Harbor
Planning
meeting.
Commission, yeah. We also had the West Bloomfield Zoning Board of Appeals. Both of those are online on our website now, on demand.
Busy, busy guy you are, Tyler.
That's for sure.
There's only one Tyler. We need to, you need like triplets. We need three Tylers.
I don't know if that's good for society.
Three Tylers, but for the price of one, because this is public access TV and it's your tax dollars. So thank you, everyone, for being with us. As I said, this is Wednesday. This is the Oakland County Megacast, and Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to noon, we work to bring you all the latest news related to COVID-19 as we continue to navigate the pandemic, which seems really like Groundhog's Day.
It does. Every single day. Every single day. It's like we're on repeat. Sometimes it's even easy when you are productive all throughout the week and you still are waking up each day like, what day is it today? Like today, for some reason, it feels to me like it's like we've already been through 5 days of this week, and we're just on Wednesday.
I think part of that has to do with the weather as well.
That doesn't help.
That's when it's rainy. I will say I overslept today, Tyler, so didn't wash my hair. I'm glad the lighting's not really great in here, so you can't see. Put a little dry powder in there. Girls know what that means. Look, girls, we have it worse. How long does it take you to get ready? 15 minutes?
Yeah, not very long.
Put a little product, wash, shower, put a little product. We don't have that luxury. And on top of that, this whole mask thing is getting irritating because of not just wearing it. I get it. I'm okay with that. But it's putting your makeup on and off. Why do we even do it as women? Because it's like the bottom half gets wiped off, but it's the lipstick. All of my mask, when I do the regular white mask, the inside is covered in my makeup, and so I feel like all I'm doing is wasting makeup because I'm putting it on, reapplying, taking it off, reapplying, and all of that. So
it's tough. It sounds tough.
Hashtag girl problems.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But let's put that aside. We have a great show for you here today on this Hump Day Wednesday to help you get through the gloomy day. We're going to be talking with the Birmingham Bloomfield Chamber of Commerce. We have them on the show quite a bit, but the reason why we do that is because information changes each and every day. And so we try to keep you updated as to everything that is going on throughout Oakland County and the state of Michigan. We're going to be talking about trying to prevent gun violence. Gun sales are up.
Yes.
They're crazy up during this pandemic. I don't know. I know you know, Tyler, but I don't know if a lot of people know out there. I used to work for ATF, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, and even at the onset of this, gun sales were up. And right now, you can't even find ammunition. So even if you bought a gun, getting ammunition is hard right now. So we're going to kind of dive into that. Why are gun sales up? And also the effort to try to prevent gun violence here in the state of Michigan. We're going to be also heading over to Eastern Michigan University, checking in with one of their student athletes who not so much focus on football right now, but social justice. So good to see some of these athletes using their voice and their platform to try to change our community. And Jennifer Newman with the Oakland Early College will be on the show as well. This is a great program. I don't know if a lot of people know, if you don't have high school students, they can actually take college
Yeah.
courses early, get a jump start on their college education.
Yeah, it's a great concept. It's a great idea, good institution, and it's something that's very unique to this area. I don't think I haven't heard of something similar to this anywhere else.
Yeah, so a head start, and plus it also saves the parents and the students money
Yep.
as they start their college education. Then we'll end the show with Greg Flynn, always our good friend here. He's the chief of the West Bloomfield Fire Department. And speaking of the West Bloomfield Fire Department, they are going to be our Facebook partner of the day. So to all of their friends out there and their followers, we say thank you for tuning in to the Oakland County Megacast as they continue to stream this show live here on their Facebook page. That's the West Bloomfield Fire Department. But you can also check us out on civiccentertv.com, as well as, Birmingham area municipal access. Listen to us on the radio, 89.3 Lakes FM, 88.1 FM The Biff. If you do have cable TV, you can find us on channel 15 on Comcast and channel 99 on AT&T. But quickly, we want to go ahead and just kind of update you on some of the headlines that you can find on civiccentertv.com. The state is going to begin listing schools with COVID-19 outbreaks. Michigan families will know if there's a COVID-19 outbreak at their K through 12 schools. That's going to start on September 14th. The information is going to be updated once a week on the state's coronavirus information page and will include the name of the school, the location, as well as the number of confirmed cases. However, right now, outbreaks on college campuses are not going to be included. The state considers a COVID-19 outbreak as 2 or more cases with a link by place and time indicating a shared exposure outside of a household. A lot of parents have been pushing for this as we head back into the school year, Tyler.
Yeah, and it's something that had been discussed previously, not necessarily directly for schools, but in general with outbreaks, being able to track where they are and for the public to have information about what outbreaks had occurred in a given time and where those outbreaks were, without giving, of course, specifics of people that were involved. And that was announced at the previous press conference by Dr. Jonay Caldoun, the Chief Medical Executive of the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. I'm sure that she'll be speaking about this today when the governor speaks at 2:30.
Yeah, I think one of the concerns coming out of this is they're only going to update it once a week. Well, we know that if you're not informed prior to that, a week is a long time and can allow for continual spread throughout that time lapse. So I think there is a concern with that issue with some of the parents maybe, but they're trying to say that, hey, these schools are already going to do their due diligence and try to inform you or through contact tracing to let you know as we continue on and try to trace where the virus is to try to help stop the virus as well. And college campuses, why, I think people are kind of concerned that they're not including the college campuses, but is it just pretty much assumed that if your kid is going to be on a college campus, they're going to have an outbreak? Because I know Adrian College, which is a private college, they've already said that we know we're going to have outbreaks, but we're going to continue on with classes.
Yeah, I think you have to assume there are going to be some outbreaks when you're in an environment like that is so condensed with so many people and so much interaction between people. You can't necessarily track and control the actions of thousands of people that are around each other all the time for several months on end. So I think that is the right mindset to have in the case of Adrian College, where, hey, we don't want an outbreak to happen. We're going to do whatever we can to prevent an outbreak or prevent an outbreak from expanding beyond a few people if it happens at all. But we have to be prepared for that to happen, and we assume that is going to happen considering the circumstances. And it's the only assumption you can really make, unless you're going to shut down in-person learning altogether and go virtual like many other institutions have.
The state is going to allow driving schools to hold virtual classes. They have been approved to conduct virtual segment 1 and 2 class sessions beginning in September for the duration of the coronavirus pandemic. Virtual classes, which must be taught in conjunction with behind-the-wheel lessons, which is good to know, will be restricted to up to 20 students with only one instructor. There has been a backlog of students waiting to get their driver's license due to the pandemic. And I asked Secretary Benson about this when she was on the show last week, and they're trying to navigate and making things by appointment and this, that, and the other. And they want to say that wait times are down, and they're handling this onslaught of people needing services from the Secretary of State's office. But I know of quite a few people that have been trying to get their driver's license, their first-time drivers, and they haven't been able to get through the process. So this is good news in that. Do you remember when you were a teenager? That was huge, getting your driver's license. And this goes beyond, at this point in time, just having it for the fun of having your driver's license. But now a lot of kids actually are going to need it if their parents are working and they're home alone and they need to get out and do things.
Yeah, and having the classes themselves be virtual is a good idea, and then of course you have to have some on-road training as well. That can't be virtual, but there's no sense in having a bunch of kids coming into a classroom, usually a very small, compact environment, to learn things that they can learn virtually. They can watch videos, they can take instruction, they can take notes on subject matter from a driving instructor virtually, and then have their driving experiences be in person, be one-on-one, or in a very small group of people. That's a controlled environment. So I think this is a good move.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised it took them so long to come up with this, because if our students, if they can learn virtually, through school and their regular schoolwork, why not come up with this way back months ago, because summertime is really such a popular time for kids to try to get their license. So also, Civic Center TV, GM and Ford is getting out of the ventilator business. They are going to be turning their focus back to the car business. Both automakers have fulfilled the terms of their contracts they had with the federal government to make the life-saving machines. Ford made 50,000 ventilators. GM made 30,000. Now, GM is still making face masks, and the company said it's going to be donating 2 million face masks to Michigan Public Schools as part of the state of Michigan's Michigan Mask Aid Partnership. So that's good news. But to me, this is kind of a sign that we're over the worst of this.
Yeah, that's what it indicates to me as well. We haven't had nearly as much of an influx of cases of COVID-19 going into our hospitals as we had in March and in April and in early parts of May. So there's not as much of a need, immediate need for these for these pieces of equipment anymore. So seeing GM and other automakers bow out of their manufacturing of these devices after their contract is done should come as no surprise. They can get back to some semblance of normal operations, and should we end up in a worst case scenario situation where their services are needed again, I'm sure they can transition pretty quickly back to that operation.
They really did an amazing job.
They did.
It was incredible how they were able to pivot, as we've been saying throughout this pandemic, how companies are pivoting. Hey, by the way, you're on Instagram, right?
I am.
Yeah, so Ivanka Trump, she tweeted out that she had landed in the Motor City last night. So the president's daughter, Ivanka Trump, who, as we all know, is part of his administration as well, she's actually in the Motor City today. She's going to be taking a tour of the Technical Learning University over GM in Warren with Mary Barra. So that's pretty cool. She's supposed to be there for a couple hours.
Yeah, it's cool to have someone from the federal government that's that close to the president in the local area. So good for them, and good for the GM plant in Warren to get that exposure as well.
Well, I think what they're trying to do is highlight the work that GM is doing to train so many people, the skilled trades job industry, because I think one of the things all these industries we're seeing have a shortage of workers. So they're coming up with different ways to try to train them to get them into some of these jobs, and that's happening in Warren. So Ivanka Trump, the president's daughter, a member of his administration in Warren today, that tour is expected to take about 2 hours. So you'll find those headlines and so much more over on civiccentertv.com. We also try to make it easy for you and put links to all the resources that you need as well. The CDC, the state of Michigan. CDC is a great site. I do check this out pretty much once a day just to try to kind of see what's going on and see how the numbers change and their policies and this, that, and the other change as well. So we are going to take a quick break here on the Oakland County Megacast, and when we come back, we're going to be talking business in the Bloomfield Hills, Birmingham area with the Chamber of Commerce there. How are things going? What changes are they seeing? I know that we do check in with them on a regular basis, but we'll take a quick break and then we'll come back and we'll talk with the president of the chamber. You're watching and listening to the Oakland
Michigan,
County Megacast.
the coronavirus pandemic has put us all to the test. And now it's time to put COVID-19 to the test. As we move forward, testing will be critical. We encourage anyone who has reason to get tested to do so, those with symptoms and those without. If you are leaving home and going back to work, get tested. If you think you may have COVID-19 or you've been exposed recently through family, friends, or coworkers, get tested. Our test locator tool can help you find the right testing site that fits your needs. Even if you're looking for easy access with no cost, no prescription, and no appointment necessary, we've got you covered. Help Michigan move forward, not backward. To find a testing site or learn more, visit michigan.gov/coronavirus test. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Thank you for joining us on the Oakland County Megacast. I'm Ronnie Dahl alongside Tyler Keefe. And our first guest on the show today, Joe Ballman, president of the Birmingham Bloomfield Chamber of Commerce. Our small businesses are the backbone of the country, and during the pandemic, they are definitely still struggling. There's been a lot of support to try to keep them in business, but still a really hard time for them. Joe, how are you doing today? Joe, it seems like we're having a little bit of...
I'll try now.
Oh, hey, let's check your audio now. Hey, folks, it's live TV. We're all doing this. Y'all are on Zoom. You know how it works. Hey, Joe, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
There you are. Good to have you. I know we like to check in with you on a regular basis, but give us an update. How are things going over there?
Well, retail continues to be a struggle. Many of our retailers, and especially our restaurants, remain on limited hours. So if you're planning on visiting your favorite store or your favorite restaurant, make sure to either call ahead or go on their website and see if their hours have been adjusted due to the pandemic. Many of them, for instance, like many of the restaurants in the Birmingham Bloomfield area that used to be open for lunch no longer are. So they're doing dinner only service. So just save yourself some time and some potential frustration and either call ahead or check out the website for their hours. And the same thing with retailers. Many of the retailers now, for instance, are closed on Monday. So I think, they're doing what they can to try to keep their expenses down as much as possible because obviously they've all, experienced significant reductions in revenue.
Yeah, I've even run into that a few times. You show up and the doors are closed and you're like, oh. So, I know the last time we talked to you, one of the big issues that some of these businesses were having was trying to get employees. Has that improved at all, or do they anticipate it's got better, but now it's going to get worse as kids go back to college?
It may have gotten better marginally, but we continue to hear from our members that they're really struggling to have enough staff. And that's another reason why some of these places are on restricted hours, because they don't have enough staff to do a full schedule. Obviously with the status of schools, K-12 schools primarily being in flux, many parents who thought their kids were going to be back in school are now finding that they're at home, and so they're either extending their working remotely for their jobs, or they're taking FMLA, they're taking sick time, they're doing whatever they can to stay home with their children, because not everybody has the ability or opportunity to provide childcare services or education assistance. So that continues to be a major, major issue for our small businesses. Is remote learning. We all understand why it's happening and why it's taking place, but it continues to be a major challenge.
Joe Bauman with us. He is the president of the Birmingham Bloomfield Chamber of Commerce with us on the Oakland County Megacast. Joe, on the topic of finding that talent to come in and take over some of these positions, which has been such a struggle, what are some of those things roles that these companies are looking to fill, and what are some of the kind of candidates that they are looking for? Because there are a lot of people that are out of work that are looking for work as well.
So obviously the service industry remains a key pressure point. Some of the employees just aren't comfortable working in a COVID environment. That's a major concern, that they're concerned about their own safety and their family safety. The other issue is, matching up the right skills with the right jobs, as you said. But I have to tell you, I've had several of our members who have basically said, we just need people to come in our doors, we can train them. And so where it used to be before, if you didn't have a resume that aligned, substantially with what the job description was, you probably wouldn't even apply for that job. What we're hearing from employers now is, unless it's, something that requires a specific degree, but if it's any kind of skill or that you can learn on the job, they're saying, just come to us and we will train you, we will pay you while we're training you. It's that serious of an issue for many, many employers.
I know that there have been a lot of grants out there for some of these small businesses. Are those grants running out now, and what's the next phase?
So starting with the federal government, I think everybody was most familiar with the PPP loans/grants through the CARES Act. So the way that those worked, if you remember, you had 8 weeks from the time to when you received the money to use it on your payroll. And if you followed all the rules, then it was likely converted to a grant. Most people who obviously received those back in May or June, they've now burned through that. Everybody's waiting for phase 4 of the CARES Act and some supplemental funding. But as we've all heard and seen, there seems to be serious roadblocks in Congress right now to that. Congress isn't even in session until after Labor Day. So, and they're very far apart on additional help. Now, the state of Michigan, they did accept the $300 supplement from the federal government for extended unemployment. So at least those employees who are still out of work, it's not the same as the $600 they were getting previously, but if they haven't yet, they should soon start receiving a $300 supplement weekly in their unemployment. At the state level, the state just did their Michigan Business Restart grant cycle through the MEDC. That has been closed, and it's our understanding that the grants are going to begin being awarded at the end of this month. So if you're a small business who's applied for up to a $20,000 grant, stay tuned, and you should be finding out within 3 or 4 weeks whether you got it. On the county side, Oakland County has been very aggressive in using some of their COVID dollars to help small businesses with grants. They've done 4 rounds, I believe, already, and they just announced last week that they've extended the deadline for the most recent round of grants to September 14th, I believe. So if you're a small business in Oakland County, if you haven't received a county stabilization grant yet, certainly apply for one. And again, those are up to $20,000. So there is help out there. Our concern, of course, is going to be if the federal government doesn't come to some consensus on phase 4 of the CARES Act, what's going to happen to all of these small businesses when all of the grants run out, and especially for small businesses that remain closed Again, the PPP grants were intended to keep people employed. So you kept people on the payroll, you paid them, you're not open, so you're not doing any business, you don't have any revenue. And so they're going to be back in the same position that they were before, that with very limited revenue and no help. So we're really hoping. We've been working very closely with our members of Congress in the state of Michigan, and they've been very responsive in terms of making sure that they understand that things are not better. And frankly, what we're hearing is that our small businesses are worried that come cold weather in the winter, things are frankly going to get worse. So we're just, I think the federal government has the largest ability to be the support mechanism, and that's what we continue to fight for every day.
So many things for us to touch on here, but let's start with the grants. For some of these small businesses that are overwhelmed with the process, what do you want them to know?
So the county grants are actually quite simple. It's maybe a 30-minute process. You do have to have some financial records that you have to pull to show, past budgets and your revenue, your payrolls, so on and so forth. The same with the state grant. Obviously, with the federal grants, either the EIDL loans, which is the economic injury disaster loans that are being done through the SBA, or the PPP, they are more extensive. Our recommendation to our members is, if they have an accountant, if they have a payroll specialist, if they have that kind of position, to really bring them into the process and have them help with the system. And then obviously you have to have an established relationship with your lender if you're going to be going for a loan, because all the loans are being funneled through local banks. So make sure to stay in close contact with your accountant and your banker.
Joe, you talked a lot about how the federal loans are going to be more critical than anything for the longevity of the survival of our small businesses. And you've talked to our congressmen in the state of Michigan and our senators, and so have your small businesses, I'm sure, but for the general public, so they can take action as well. From a temporal standpoint, how long do our businesses have if these loans are not coming in a timely manner before they're in a position where it's do or die?
I would say that now, the governor has a press conference scheduled for 2:30 this afternoon. What we're hearing is she may, at long last, bring liberty to local gyms, movie theaters, and bowling centers, and will allow them to reopen in some limited capacity. We don't know that for sure, but that's what we're hearing from our friends in Lansing. If you think about it, if you have a business that hasn't been open in 6 months, while it's true, you have saved all of the expenses of running a business, but you also haven't generated any revenue. And so it would be just like anybody being out of work for 6 months. Well, how long can you do that? Most of the retailers that we talk to that are still open in some capacity, they've let go staff. They're trying to do more things themselves. As we know, in downtown Birmingham, they don't get nearly the foot traffic that they do in the winter months as they do in the spring and summer, for obvious reasons. It's an outdoors environment. So if there isn't a long-range plan to help businesses in certain industry sectors that have been the hardest hit and continue to be the hardest hit, it's not a promising future, I have to say. And that's why we're working so hard every day to educate our members, to let them know what programs are out there that they can tap into, how to get a hold of their elected officials, to speak directly with them and their staffs, to let them know what their situations are, and to make sure that everybody understands that while we all may be growing weary of dealing with COVID-19 and the virus, it hasn't gone away. The executive orders from the governor are still in place in terms of how people can conduct business and public gatherings. If you are a caterer or an event space, you essentially have been out of business for 6 months. And so while we understand the health implications of all of that and the public health reasons, it can't go on forever. Something has to be done to accommodate or to support these specific industries, or, in 2021, frankly, we just don't know how many are still going to be around.
Yeah, there's a lot of concern going into the winter months, how some of these restaurants that have been able to expand outside are businesses. Hey, Joe, I know some of the state lawmakers right now are in discussions concerning some new laws to try to protect businesses from COVID-19, and not just businesses, but maybe schools, nursing homes, things of that nature. But where do you stand as a small business entity and supporter and trying to push this issue with the lawmakers? And what they're trying to say is that, hey, as a small business, we shouldn't be held responsible if someone is test positive, because it's hard to trace where people actually get the virus.
Right. Thank you very much for asking that. So there was actually testimony in Lansing yesterday. There are two bills making their way through the House and Senate, which are essentially liability shield laws for small businesses and places like schools that you mentioned. The Birmingham Bloomfield Chamber is part of a coalition through the Michigan Chamber that is supporting the legislation and pushing for this liability protection for the very reason that you just said. We all know we live in a very litigious society, and even though you have no liability, it doesn't prevent somebody from still suing you. And there are costs associated with defending lawsuits, even if they're frivolous. So again, it's kind of like piling on. Your revenue is down, your expenses are the same, you don't have as many customers as you used to have to, and now you have to fight a lawsuit from somebody who claims that they're in your store or restaurant and they contracted the virus and now they're suing you. You can't really prove that they got it there, but guess what? You also can't prove that they didn't. And that's where settlements come in. And so the object of these liability shield laws would simply be small businesses would be protected from lawsuits, specifically from people claiming that they contracted the virus at your establishment. Now, there is one caveat to that, is our small businesses have to make sure that they are following all the protocols called for by the CDC, the state health department, the state of Michigan, that they're doing everything they can within their power to mitigate the likelihood of somebody contracting COVID in their establishment. If there's gross negligence, if it can be proven that they weren't following the rules and the guidelines, then that's a completely separate issue. But this is for just trying to provide some blanket protection for small businesses so they don't have to deal with frivolous lawsuits on top of everything else.
Joe Bauman with us, president of the Birmingham Bloomfield Chamber of Commerce on the Oakland County Megacast. Just a couple more minutes with you, Joe, before we have to let you go. Anything else that's important for our audience to know about our small business community, or anything else you'd like to talk about today with us?
Well, I always try to end on a positive note, and I have to say that that's been quite a challenge these past few months. But I do want to mention, if you're not aware, that phase 2 of the city of Birmingham's major road reconstruction project in the heart of downtown Birmingham is about 75 to 80% completed and on schedule. If you're not familiar with it, the city has is completely rebuilding the road and all of the pedestrian walkways and the landscaping on Maple Road, which runs right through the heart of downtown Birmingham from Woodward West all the way to Southfield Road. They've also reconfigured the Southfield Maple intersection. So if you're familiar with that at all, you'll know why they needed to do that. Similar to what they did with Old Woodward 2 years ago, they really made it more pedestrian friendly, multimodal use of the road. So they're accommodating bikes and mopeds and cars, calming the streets so people aren't going as fast, doing some great landscaping. It's going to be absolutely beautiful. We're hoping that we get the road reopened by the end of September, so there'll still be a couple of months of outdoor shopping available, and people are really going to love and wanting to come down and visit downtown Birmingham and help support the local merchants in this really beautiful environment.
That is good news, because I say road construction in the middle of all of this has not been good. I try to avoid some of those areas. Hey, Joe, before we let you go, we have to ask, while we like your current background because it does highlight your partnership, we like the old one. It was very snazzy.
Well, I'll mix them up. How's that? Next time I'll come with a different one.
Wonderful.
You know what? You need a Zoom producer like we have, and then you could switch the background throughout the interview.
I got you. Well, the businesses that are on our sponsor board are what we call our legacy partners. These are businesses that make a major investment in the chamber on an annual basis, which allows us to offer a lot of our programming at either low cost or no cost to our members. And so we always tell, our membership in general, if you are thankful for being able to go to a mixer or a professional development program at no charge and send your staff there, these are the companies that you want to thank and try to do business with. Now, obviously, it's a little different this year because everything's being done remotely. And we haven't charged for any of our programming all year because we feel it's important to try to push out as much information as we can to as many as we can. So, but these are the companies that have really stepped up with the chamber and are true partners in helping to try to improve the business climate for all of our communities.
That's so important. Connections right now during this crisis are what's going to be able to see us through. So, Joe, thank you so much for being with us on the Oakland County Megacast. We appreciate your time and your insight as well. We're going to take a quick break here, and then when we come back, we are going to switch focus just a little bit, and we're going to talk about something a bit more serious of a topic, the efforts to try to prevent gun violence here in the state of Michigan and Oakland County. You're listening to and watching the Oakland County Megacast.
Hi, I'm Dr. Faust, the Medical Director for the Oakland County Health Division. The most important thing you can do to prevent the spread of illness is to wash your hands thoroughly and often. Follow these 6 easy steps every time you wash your hands. Step 1, turn on the sink and wet your hands with warm water. Step 2, apply soap to your hands and lather between your fingers, under your nails, and the front and back of your hands and wrists. Step 3, wash your hands by scrubbing them together for at least 20 seconds. Step 4, rinse your hands with warm, clean water. And Step 5, dry your hands with a clean cloth towel, a paper towel, or hot air blow dryer. If you're using a cloth towel, make sure to change it often. For handheld faucets, turn off the water using a paper towel instead of your bare hand. Step 6, if you're using a paper towel, throw it away. Practice healthy habits like washing your hands after coughing or sneezing into them to keep you and others healthy. Go to oakgov.com/health or call Nurse on Call at 1-800-848-5533 to learn more.
Michigan, the coronavirus pandemic has put us all to the test. And now it's time to put COVID-19 to the test. As we move forward, testing will be critical. We encourage anyone who has reason to get tested to do so, those with symptoms and those without. If you are leaving home and going back to work, get tested. If you think you may have COVID-19 or you've been exposed recently through family, friends, or coworkers, get tested. Our test locator tool can help you find the right testing site that fits your needs. Even if you're looking for easy access with no cost, no prescription, and no appointment necessary, we've got you covered. Help Michigan move forward, not backward. To find a testing site or learn more, visit michigan.gov/coronavirus test. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
So, an important topic, but a serious topic that we want to talk about right now. More than 100 people a day are killed by gun violence across the United States. About 200 more are shot. And there is a coalition, the Michigan Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence, that is working behind the scenes to try to bring these numbers down and to keep our communities safe. Let's go ahead and bring in now Dr. Chris Smith. He is the board chairperson of the Michigan Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence. Chris, thanks for being with us on the Oakland County Megacast.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Give us a little bit of background to your organization and what you are doing to try to address this issue.
we're a nonprofit, education-oriented organization. So fundamentally, we try to provide good, accurate information to inform both the public and policymakers about the nature of gun violence problems, with the idea that in a now time of political polarization, seeking to reduce the number of deaths and injuries from gun violence ought to be a goal we can all share, even if we don't have identical views about the Second Amendment or gun control. So how is it that we can develop dialogue and work together as problem solvers? And of course, we have some big impediments with this issue because of the power of emotion, belief, and political rhetoric, which tends to keep people apart. So it's a challenge, and it's probably a long path, and we don't talk about solutions. We talk about what we can do to reduce the nature of harm and reduce risk.
This is it is such a hot button political issue, and even Second Amendment supporters, I think you both can agree that it's about trying to curb gun violence. And talk about some of the policies that you're trying to change and why there is so much pushback in trying to get that done.
Well, first, just so we can have a clarification, because sometimes we get divided too much into camps. The Second Amendment is part of the Bill of Rights. I've spent 35 years teaching about the Bill of Rights, including the Second Amendment. I support the Second Amendment. My interpretation may be different than somebody else's, but we all ought to be able to focus on what does the Supreme Court say is the legal definition of the Second Amendment, which does provide protection, so that people should not look at any proposal as the beginning of a path to taking away people's guns. We got to get over that hump first so that we can talk. But I would say there's several things that we know from research that ought to be able to be a focus that we can all be concerned about. When we talk about roughly 40,000 gun deaths a year in the United States, about 2/3 of those are suicides. So if we could focus on, and many, many, many of those are rural suicides of men. That ought to be something that urban, rural, Republican, Democrat should be able to talk about and think about. Is there a way that we can reduce those kinds of numbers? We know from research that domestic violence is a context in which the presence of a firearm statistically increases the likelihood of serious injury or homicide. We ought to be able to focus on that. And we also ought to be able to focus on those accidents that happen every year where firearms are left unsecured in homes. They're accessed by a child who injures him or herself, or injures or kills another child. We all ought to be concerned about that. So there are laws in some other states. There have been some proposals in our legislature, for example, to increase requirements for the way in which you secure a firearm in your home, so that people would be held responsible if they are careless or negligent about leaving a loaded firearm around where a 5-year-old could find it. So that's one kind of policy. Some states have emergency risk protection orders, which have been, by some research, shown to have some positive effects. And that is, if there is evidence that someone poses a risk to themselves or others, a family member or law enforcement could go to court and seek a temporary order to remove firearms from them. And a lot of these have to do with suicide risks. And people then can get those back, if they're past the moment of crisis, as there's evidence that they're no longer a risk to themselves or others, that opportunity is there. But of course, in the United States, we still don't have universal background checks. And that system then allows people to acquire firearms who shouldn't have firearms. And it seems to me there's broad public opinion sort of support for that among gun owners and non-gun owners. And that's something that we ought to be out to have more agreement about. But this is, very much in a divided political environment. There's some business realities here. If you're a gun manufacturer, there's a finite number of Americans who are going to purchase firearms. How do you keep your sales going, right? And unfortunately, one of the ways you do that is to try to make it easier to buy firearms, to try to encourage people to buy multiple kinds of firearms. And I think also contribute politically to those politicians who see this issue as a way to fan fear and increase division in society. If we could make some breakthroughs here in talking to each other, that might help us with some other issues too.
So one of the things, just to let people know, if you do go into a store to actually purchase a firearm, you do have to go through a federal background check. And but I believe what you're talking about is what some people say is a loophole in the system, and that when you buy a firearm from a private individual, you don't necessarily have to go through that background check, correct?
That's not the same thing. And the other issue with the background check in stores is there's a time limit. So like if the background check isn't completed, and I think it is 3 days, the person automatically gets to get the firearm. So like the young man who went to the black church in Charleston, South Carolina, and joined the Bible study group and then pulled out the gun and killed 9 people, the status of his criminal record should have barred him from purchasing that firearm. But because the system was so slow, and frankly, part of it is slow because there's been politics involved in preventing efficient computerization, he was able to acquire that firearm and commit those horrible murders. So we can improve the existing system as well as try to make it universal. Is that going to prevent someone from getting a gun who's very determined who shouldn't have it? No. But we do see in states with stricter background checks that they do stop lots of people who want to make that immediate purchase. And if we can slow down that process for someone who's in a moment of rage, right, and make it a little longer for them to acquire it, that may not be a bad thing either. Because again, we're not talking about solving the problems of crime, solving the problems of suicide, whatever. We're talking about, are there ways we can improve the system that will save some lives and reduce the number of injuries and fatalities?
We're talking with Dr. Chris Smith, board chairperson of the Michigan Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence. The background check is what's referred to as NICS, is the National Instant Criminal Background Check. And so people, just so you know, you go in, you purchase a gun. If you don't, that's ran by the FBI. If you don't get a quick response, then after a certain time limit, you are able to take that gun. But if later it's determined you weren't allowed to have it, then they do contact the ATF to come out and try to recover that gun, which isn't always so easy. So there are so many gray areas into the gun laws within the entire country. It makes it so hard to navigate. And are you concerned because there was a huge increase at the beginning of the pandemic on the number of guns purchased throughout the country? However, the one thing that is hard to get right now is ammunition.
Well, and that I assume is a manufacturing distribution issue. It's not going to be a permanent issue. I mean, I read a report today that 2 million guns were sold in August. I mean, not the beginning of the pandemic, just this month that ended. And that was the 5th highest level of sales in the history of tracking the number of gun purchases. So obviously, if you're in a context where people are being driven by fear, where people think that they ought to be vigilantes and do the job of the police and that sort of thing, it's a recipe for making the problem worse. But there are other kinds of things to think about. For example, my son is a military officer, and he decided he needed to get an AR-15, which was the closest approximation to the M4 that they use in the Army, because he, wanted to go target shooting, and he needed to, stay sharp for periodic testing. He got that weapon within a couple of minutes of going in. The background check was quick. He bought the weapon. And I think the most striking thing to him was there's no evidence or question that he knows how to use the weapon, right? And this is a weapon that has various features and aspects and a higher capacity magazine that could do a lot of harm. Would there be something to be said for, the analogy is the automobile, having a class, like people have to do for concealed carry, having a class, taking a test, demonstrating, safety rules and these sorts of things. I mean, there's other kinds of things that we ought to be able to talk about, but we run into often, beliefs about the Second Amendment that, prevent us from even talking about it.
Dr. Chris Smith with us, the board chairperson for the Michigan Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence, with us on the Oakland County Megacast. Dr. Smith, moving forward with this, where do we start this conversation about making changes to our systems or modifying the systems that are in place already to make our society safer and prevent gun violence without, of course, limiting the rights of the people?
I was going to ask you, because this is a big problem.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of issues where people have a lot of beliefs and a lot of divisions. And one of our challenges is to think, can we create contexts in which people might set aside their beliefs and say, let me listen to information. How has the Supreme Court actually defined the Second Amendment? Not what people say they wish it would mean. Because that actually does give us a range of possibilities to have legislation while still permitting people to own firearms with the protected right of the Supreme Court. How do we get people to listen to research about gun violence and to say, wow, in light of that research, perhaps without sacrificing my right, there could be some things that would be done that would reduce to some extent the number of deaths. Unfortunately, we are literally at a moment that seems to make those conversations impossible. I mean, it's almost as if in an election year, especially a presidential election year, especially this presidential election year, one fears we got to get beyond the election and calm things down in order to aspire to have those conversations. And tragically, in many of those states where those conversations finally occur, it's because of the most horrific mass shooting events, which are not representative of gun violence generally, but which strike such a chord of tragedy to people that they then do say, maybe we should do a little more background checks or what have you. We don't want that in Michigan, but that's what's happened sadly in other states that has triggered conversations and action.
Yeah, it seemed like prior to the pandemic, President Trump appeared as if he may have been open to some discussions in this arena and with the NRA and some of the issues that the NRA is having right now. However, it didn't happen. The pandemic did hit. And there is an argument being made that, well, the criminals that are still going to be able to get their hands on the guns because they're not going in and doing the background checks. They're not following the rules that are already laid out. So how are you going to stop from criminals that are using the guns to do so much harm in our communities? How do you stop them because they're not following the rules that are in place as it is?
Well, again, I don't talk about stop because the problem's so massive. I talk about reduce. How do we reduce access? How do we go after that more? And clearly, we're going to have to do some things like increasing the emphasis, increasing the resources of Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, Explosives. Because unfortunately, politically, that law enforcement agency, as well as the IRS, have often been under attack by people who believe they're a threat to my rights. We should limit the resources they have. We should limit what they're able to do. But when you have these, we have a federal system of this patchwork of state laws. And what that means is there are certain states that are states of origin with lax laws that facilitate gun trafficking networks that we really should apply greater law enforcement attention to. I mean, there was a study once done in New York City, and it was a staggering number of guns that originated in Virginia that ended up in New York City. I mean, there's something to be said for uniformity in national laws as much as we can. But that's a persistent problem that we have to keep going after. But the reality is the largest number of deaths and injuries is not from that. It is from suicides, and it is from gun violence within families and domestic situations, people who know each other. So there are other pieces of this problem that we ought to go after too. But I don't claim there's a magic wand cure. When you have over 300 million firearms already available, there's no instant stop to that. This is something you have to keep working at to try to bring down the numbers. And the reality that most people don't realize is homicide rates have gone down unbelievably over the course of 3 decades in many places. But the fact that whatever the rate is, it's too high for us as a public. But from a macro perspective, we've had progress on violent crime. And now in the 21st century, we have certain years where we get these ticks up and down. We're in a little uptick year for reasons that we can speculate about. But in fact, compared to going back to the 1980s, we're in much better shape than we are now. It's not because of gun policy, it's because of the confluence of other factors that criminologists have challenges getting their arms around. So yes, you're right. I don't have a cure for keeping people with bad motives from getting firearms. I'd like to work on ways to make it more difficult for them so that you might have certain individuals for whom it is sufficiently hard that the moment passes for them to do what they wanted to do, and perhaps we've saved a life.
Dr. Chris Smith with us on the Oakland County Megacast. He is the board chairperson of the Michigan Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence. Dr. Smith, we talked about background checks of particularly of criminal records, but there's not really anything there that provides a background check for any mental health issues. Is that a blind spot that we have in our country in terms of acquiring firearms and in many other cases as well that's contributing significantly to the gun violence issue?
I would worry about the suicide issue in particular there, given the numbers. To me, that's an area that requires greater attention and understanding, because obviously, the word mental health covers a very significant spectrum of things that people deal with, whether it's depression, anxiety, or what have you. I think we need a greater sense of definition of what it is that concerns us. But this is also where a dozen states have gone to these emergency risk protection orders. So when family members see someone in their family who is going into depression, who is talking about suicide, who is engaging in behaviors that raise fear of suicide, or who is in a time of rage about some relationship or some domestic issue, and what they've gone to is to at least have this possibility to go to court and present evidence about this so a judge can conclude temporarily you need to not have access with firearms while you deal with this issue. I mean, we've had some tragic situations. There was a mass shooting in California a few years ago, University of California, Santa Barbara, and the young man's parents went to the police and said his writings and his behavior indicate he plans to go out and harm people. He has these weapons here. Can't you at least temporarily remove these weapons while we try to get him to accept help? And law enforcement said, we have no legal authority to do that. And he went and did kill people. And, that kind of anecdote has contributed in many states to try to think of this alternative mechanism. I don't know enough about mental health and psychiatric issues to say, how would you define that in a background check? I mean, I'd be concerned of saying, well, someone who's been institutionalized or whatever, because we got medical privacy records, we have people who go into inpatient things for depression. That is a tough area. But my own sense is, numbers-wise for risk, that really is a concern about suicide, even as we do see individual people clearly with mental health issues who go out and harm others as well.
You're listening to 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake, 88.1 WBFH Bloomfield Hills. Dr. Smith, before we let you go, how can people find your organization if they want to learn more about what you are doing or even get involved?
So we have, a website that is just the Michigan Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence.org. You should be able to find us by Googling gun violence Michigan. We're in a kind of transitional moment because COVID pandemic has sort of prevented having, meetings and, events at the Capitol and that sorts of thing. But, we do have information on there. We're trying to add information that is both informative and thought-provoking and hopefully non-threatening to people's beliefs. So that as we are in this COVID moment, they can read and learn and share things they may learn that's new. But the other reality is this is all about who's going to be the lawmakers. And we just encourage people to say, assess your views on gun violence and the gun violence problem. Ask questions to political candidates and assess political candidates and include that in the menu of issues that you're concerned about as you seek to vote for people who are interested in this issue and whose views perhaps reflect the same as your own.
The election is just around the corner. Great advice, not just for your topic, but all topics that you are worried about as an individual. Dr. Smith, thank you so much for joining us on the Oakland County Megacast and sharing this important information.
Thank you for the opportunity.
So we do want to let people know as well, we have so many kids right now, Tyler, that are working from or, the remote learning from home. So a lot of kids that are in the home. For all the parents out there, we've seen these tragic cases, a lot of them, or not a lot, but way too many of them, especially in the city of Detroit, where the kids have been able to get a hold of the guns in a household. Kids are curious. So whenever you purchase a firearm, be sure to get a gun lock with it, or get a safe, get a gun lock. If you don't have a gun lock, you can get them from free. You can, there is a project, but go into any one of your local police departments. I know Keiko Harbor has them, the Oakland County Sheriff's Department. I believe they even have them in their vehicles as well. So if you are if they are out driving around, it's okay to stop and ask for one or go to the police department and get one. They are not going to grill you on your firearms weapon or ask, what type you have or this, that, and the other, because there are concerns about that. But the big thing, if you are going to have a firearm in your home, please make sure that you do lock it up, especially now with so many kids in the home as they're remote learning.
Yeah, and your local police department can help you with more information about it. If you can't do the gun lock or whatever the case may be, or even if you do have a gun lock, that there are other means you can take as well to prevent your children from getting access or anybody else from getting access to those guns. And our local police departments are always willing to be helpful in providing that information as well.
Yeah, we're going to take a quick break here, and then when we come back, we are going to speak with Eastern Michigan University football player who is not even focusing on football right now, but some of our social justice issues and getting involved in that. You're listening to and watching the Oakland County Megacast.
Michigan, we're calling on you to save lives. Don't ignore it. Don't let it go to voicemail. It's urgent. In fact, it's critical. Because if you've been in close contact with someone who tests positive for COVID-19, you may have been exposed to the virus. And you could get a call from My COVID Help or your local health department. So please answer the call to learn how to protect yourself, your family, and friends. We're calling on you to stop the spread of COVID-19, to make it safe to reopen businesses and help Michigan move forward. So if you get a call from My COVID Help or your local health department, you may have been exposed to someone with COVID-19. To protect us all, answer the call. Learn more at michigan.gov/containcovid. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Hi, my name is Kurt Lawson, and I'm the Public Information Officer for West Bloomfield Township. We wanted to reach out to you, our older adults, to provide information that you may find useful during this difficult time. We want to ensure you that West Bloomfield Town Hall, our Waters and Utility Department, West Bloomfield Parks, and our police and fire departments continue to work hard on your behalf. Information and resources can be found on the Township website, the police Facebook and Twitter, or call West Bloomfield Park's COVID-19 Help Hotline. Please remember to keep your social distance of at least 6 feet, wear facial coverings when you leave your home, and wash your hands for at least 20 seconds with soap. These precautions will help keep you safe during these difficult times.
Has been like a year, no other. Back on New Year's Eve, 2020 sounded really cool. But going through this pandemic, I will say one thing about 2020 is it has brought so many issues to light and forced them to the forefront, because maybe at this point in time, we are going to start having to deal with them. And one of those issues being the racial injustice that has been experienced in America and, in fact, across the world since the beginning of time. But as we are continuing to go through COVID-19, we are seeing a lot of protests taking place, a lot of people getting involved in this issue. First, we had George Floyd. Then we had Jacob Blake, but prior to that, there were so many others. And right now, we want to go ahead and bring in Tariq Speights. He is a civil rights activist and Eastern Michigan University student athlete. Tariq, I know that you're on the football team, and football is taking a backstage right now. Tell us a little bit about why you decided to organize the protest in Ann Arbor over racial injustice.
Yeah, so there's a group of guys on my team, as well as a group of guys from the University of Michigan football team, and just through having some conversations through social media, we decided that together we wanted to take a public stand and let the public know where we where basically we felt and how we felt about everything going on. So Ann Arbor is about 10 minutes away from Ypsilanti. And so we figured it would be good to unite our two communities and to publicly take a stand with everything going on, the racial injustices going on, the police brutality going on. We figured we would come together and have strength in numbers, basically, having everyone come out.
So after the protest, what did you walk away with? Do you feel like it made a difference or at least started a conversation?
Definitely. I told in another interview I had earlier, I basically said that if we had 2 people come out to the protest, then in my eyes, it would be a success because it started the conversation. But to see that we had almost a little over 500 people come out and support us, I think that was awesome. That we had that many people come out, that many people support us for not only who we are, not only what we do, but who we are. So I think that was awesome.
Tariq Speights with us. He is a civil rights activist and Eastern Michigan University student athlete with us on the Oakland County Megacast. And right now, Tariq, we're seeing in professional sports and in college sports with people like yourself who are using their platform where athletes are looked up to by so many people in our society, adults and children alike. And we can learn a lot by utilizing those platforms to spread the good word across the country and across the world about making positive changes. How important is it for you and for your teammates, knowing the platform you have in the Eastern Michigan community and in the athletics and in the sports community, to be able to fight for this social justice?
It's huge. Using your platforms is like big, and using your platforms, there's people who don't use them right. So it's not just that people are using their platforms, but they're using it to spread the right messages, to get out the right message. So like myself, I have about 2,000 followers on both of my social media pages. And so anytime I post something, you have 2,000 eyes looking at it. So if you're posting stuff that's spreading the right message and stuff like that, it could be a very quick way and easy way to get out a good message. Something that our coach talks about here is that leadership is influence. And so if you can go and influence one person, that one person can go in and influence another person. And then you really could end up influencing a lot of people to do the right thing, but you're not necessarily having to do it individually with, like, say, 100 people that I have on my team. I could go and talk to one of my teammates, and that one teammate can go and influence 10 other people. And that message is still getting spreaded, but it's not necessarily that one person doing all the forward.
Tariq Speights with a civil rights activist and Eastern Michigan University student athlete on the Oakland County Megacast. So you have the protest earlier on in August against social injustices, police brutality, and so on and so forth. And you're using your platform to build that chain of leadership, so to speak, from you to other people and from other people to their networks and so on and so forth. Any further plans right now for more protests or more discussions in the community using the platform that you have and the influence that you and other student athletes at Eastern Michigan have as a catapult for these critical societal conversations?
Yeah, definitely. So us as I guess would say like an athletic department, we have a student athletic advisory committee. It's called SAC. So basically with that, we launched a voting initiative early, I want to say maybe July, just trying to get our entire athletic department registered to vote, because voting is part of the way we can enact change. Protesting is awesome, but voting is like an action that we can physically do to enact the change we want to see. Excuse me. But we already have, I think we're at maybe 4 or 5 of our athletic teams 100% registered to vote. And so our goal is to get I think we have 17 of our varsity teams registered to vote. So that's one of the things we're doing at Eastern. But like I said at the protest, this is just the start of it. It's the start of bringing our two communities together, Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti. So we're planning on doing a lot of stuff in the future, especially leading up to the election. And then after that, because right now sports are taking we're still very much student athletes, but with the season not happening right now, it gives us a unique time to address some other important issues off the field. So,
in talking about your teammates, I know that you're not going to be playing, but has it brought you all closer together, and do you think it will make you a stronger team?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say something about the culture of Eastern Michigan football. Like when I was getting recruited here, Coach Creighton and even some of the other coaches talked about how much of a family it is here and a brotherhood. And so many times you hear that during recruiting and it sounds like it's just a recruiting point or something to sell. Me being here for now a year now, like it's not just a recruiting point. That's like, we're all a family here. All 115 guys on the team, as well as the coaches, those are all my brothers. I look up to the coaches. I feel like I could trust any of them with anything I needed in my life. So I definitely think like Eastern Michigan, we're a bunch of guys who have already gone through adversity. If you look at all 115 guys on the roster, we've all had some type of adversity that has got us here. So this is just another challenge for us, but it's nothing that we haven't handled and succeeded or been victorious through. So it definitely has brought us together, but it's just another step that we have to overcome, and we're going to do it. And whenever they do let us play, we're going to be ready, whether that's in the spring or whether that's in the fall, but Eastern Michigan is going to be ready to play.
Tariq, I know that your protest that you were a part of was a peaceful protest, and it brought a lot of people out. It started a lot of conversations. But throughout the country, we are seeing where some of these protests do lead to violence or looting. Do you think that is taking away from the message and the work of what you and other people like you are trying to do?
It definitely could. It definitely could be something to take away. I kind of addressed it before we started the protest on Saturday, that to like what the purpose of the protest was. It was to take a stance against everything going on, to use our voices. And I made it clear that we're not, like, the intention of this, we're not going to go destroy property. We're not going to go get violent, because that's going to give any opposition of what we're doing, it's going to give them something they could say to discredit whatever we're doing. So I do think that the violence and the looting and stuff like that is such a small percentage of the peaceful protests that go on. But obviously we know the media, and so most times you're going to see the bad stuff. You're not going to see necessarily the good stuff. So I do think that it can lead to it being discredited, but at the same time, I think judging a movement by its most violent part is not what you should do, because the movement is so much more than that. And I think, like we did it on Sunday, it's being done all over the country. And so we're just seeing a snapshot of some of the violence, of some of the looting and stuff like that. But I do urge more and more leaders to make sure they make that clear, that that's not the purpose, and that it can serve to discredit whatever good you're doing.
It's such an important conversation and important work that you and other athletes are getting involved in, as well as other people throughout the country. But a question, how do you take it from the protest, having your voices heard, to getting that enacted in policy for long-term change?
Definitely. So through the past few months, I've been told that I should change my major to political science. But that's one of the ways, getting into professions that we had a talk with the Washington County Sheriff Sheriff Jerry Clayton. And so he was talking about like why he's in the profession. And so seeing stuff, protesting, that's part of the solution. But at some point, you're going to have a seat at the table of power. So having more and more people who understand that message, who want to see change, you have to figure out ways how to get them into seats of power. So whether it be elected positions, whether it be people voting, that it's a big thing. And not just voting on November 3rd, but voting in your local elections, voting for the sheriff, which are elected positions in most counties, voting for the prosecutors of the county and stuff like that. That's how you could really see the change. And the presidential election is huge, but more and more, the president is just one person. Making sure you put the right people in power in your communities and your counties is the biggest way you could see that start to become policy and not just opinion.
So Tariq, while we have you here, let me ask you that. So you said you had a meeting with the sheriff there. What has your relationship with law enforcement been? And I know law enforcement agencies are trying to diversify their membership because, as you said, you can't change things from the outside. You need to be on the inside and have a seat at the table. Is it hard to try to diversify when so many things like this are going on?
Yeah, I would say I started out as a criminal justice major when I first came to college. And a lot of things, including some of the stuff that's going on, kind of pushed me out of wanting to do that. At least primarily focusing on that. But I would say it's being more comfortable with having those uncomfortable conversations. So I had a conversation with the sheriff the day before the protest, and we had about an hour conversation just talking about stuff, like trying to knock down some of those barriers that have been made because of how the relationship between African Americans and law enforcement has been in this country for so long. But it's going to take having those uncomfortable conversations for us to truly see change. And so I don't think you could really say, like, you don't really know how the other side feels until you truly ask. So having more of those conversations, I feel that I'm already starting to build a relationship with Sheriff Clayton. I met Chief Cox. I think he's Ann Arbor police this past weekend as well too. So just having more and more of those conversations and breaking down those barriers that may have been created by previous generations, that's how we're going to see change.
Tariq Speights, civil rights activist, Eastern Michigan University football player. Thanks for taking time to be with us on the Oakland County Megacast, and thank you for caring enough to get involved to try to make a difference, because you can't change things from the sidelines.
Definitely. Thank you, guys.
Hey, and by the way, your dog is really good. If you trained him, can I hire you to come train ours?
He's a very chill dude, so yeah, he's passed out right now.
It's morning nap time for your dog. Thanks so much, Tariq. It was great talking to you. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to take a quick break here on the Oakland County Megacast. We'll be back in just a few seconds.
This may seem uncomfortable, but so is being hooked to an IV, sleeping in a hospital bed, and fighting for your life. When it comes to COVID-19, comfort is not as important as saving lives. Wearing a mask can greatly reduce the chance of spreading the virus. So mask up, Michigan, every time you leave home.
As rivals, we don't always see eye to eye.
Like who scored the best recruits?
Who's gonna be who?
And whether we wear green
Or blue. But one thing we can all agree on to help stop the spread of COVID-19: wear a mask.
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 The ball's in your court, Michigan.
Ooh, this week is all about back to school.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but kids can get a head start. High school kids can get a head start on their college education. I think a lot of kids don't understand that. So who doesn't want a head start in life? And for that, let's bring in Jennifer Newman. She's the head of school, Oakland Early College. Jennifer, thanks for being with us on the Oakland County Megacast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
So I can be a high school and say I'm a college student at the same time. That's cool.
Absolutely. So at Oakland Early College, all of our students are dual enrolled their entire time at OEC. They're enrolled at OCC. So they have an account with me where they have like their West Bloomfield email. They have their OCC account. So they're actual, literally OCC students, just like you or I would be if we took a class at the college. Their professors don't even know they're high school students. They're not identified as special on their rosters. So they're literally taking classes with the general population their whole entire experience at the school.
So are you seeing an increase in enrollment for this program with so many students being remote right now?
Actually, our numbers were pretty good this year. So yes, we're probably, COVID assisted us in surpassing what our enrollment goals were. So yeah, we're sitting at about 170 students. We have 58 new students. It is an application school. So students do apply for admittance from all over the county. We start students as early as 9th grade. The 9th graders don't have the opportunity to dual enroll until second semester, but everybody else is enrolled in at least one college class, but more as they get older, as they go through their time. So we graduate after 13th grade instead of 12th grade. There are about 180 early colleges in the state right now. They all do the same thing. And so our 13th graders are actually full-time college students, but they're attached back to me with one class called Seminar. In Seminar, like right now, they're working on all their college applications for university admittance. And so our students still apply to schools just like you would in the fall of 12th grade year. They apply in the fall of 13th grade year to go to whatever university or college they're looking at. Or some students stay at OCC and finish an associate degree if they hadn't finished their degree before they left school. Or some students go right into the trades or take a gap year. But most of our students are applying to four-year universities, U of M, Michigan State, wherever.
So the classes they took, do they then transfer into their four-year school or two-year school?
Yes. So most of them do. Colleges and universities work very nicely with OCC. Their Oakland Community College is a great institution and they have a very strong reputation. And so most college classes roll to most universities, but schools get to pick. So like University of Michigan is like a little bit pickier on some of their classes that roll in depending on what program of study you're doing. But some classes are just not classes that transfer. So for example, fencing is a class that I would actually really like to take with students. I think that would be super fun, but that's not necessarily a class that would transfer over to an institution.
Jennifer Newman with us. She is the head of school over at Oakland Early College with us today on the Oakland County Megacast. So Jennifer, are your classes entirely virtual? Are they in person? How's that running during this special semester we're now in here in the local area?
So we're really fortunate because we were able to bring students back on a blended schedule. So West Bloomfield School District is our educational partner. So like my boss is Dr. Hill. He's the superintendent for West Bloomfield Schools. And so we were able to start planning almost like May about how we would be able to bring students back live. And so OCC gifted us the space that we're using on campus. We're probably one of the only groups on campus anywhere in the county right now because OCC is completely virtual. But we have half of our population coming in on Mondays and Tuesdays. And then they learn remotely Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then the other half of the population comes in on Thursday, Friday, and they're learning remotely Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So everybody's remote on Wednesdays. So we have 6 feet social distancing. We rented 4 hand washing stations. So we have a rotation set up every hour. Students are encouraged to go wash their hands. We have hand sanitizers at every classroom. We have signs. We have all kinds of pieces in place to make sure that we are as healthy as we possibly can as a school. And it's clean. The building has never been so clean. Desks are washed with, like masks, and we have all our stuff washed in between each class. Students walk outside in between each class so we can get good airflow. We have air purifiers going in every room. It's just truly remarkable that we were able to get everything in place. Our desks are marked with like gaffer's tape, which is my favorite tape on the planet. It's theater tape. So everything is set to go. We've been in person 4 days now. So tomorrow our B group comes in, and it's really exciting to see students. There's lots of research that talks about if you can bring students back live in a safe environment, that is the best for their mental health and their academic health. So we're very fortunate that we were able to do that. And we had a strong planning team that included the teachers, included parents, included district personnel to figure out what our plan would be to be able to come back in a safe format. It's very exciting.
I know a lot of students, because the high schools are remote here in West Bloomfield, so for those that want that in-person experience, this probably does mean a lot to them. Jennifer, you said that it is by application. How does that work? Do you only admit so many students per semester, and are there certain topics that are only offered?
So the application is kind of a rolling application, but students can only enter at a semester transition because they need, we're still working towards your high school diploma, so you need to finish your college or your high school semester so that those credits can roll to us and we can pick up where you left off. But it's the process is you would reach out to me or you would reach out to my secretary, and she would schedule right now, which would be a Zoom family meeting. And so I meet with each family for about an hour, and we talk about what the school looks like. I'm gauging the interest of the student, because if I sense the student doesn't have an interest in the early college model, then I would never accept that student. So we sit for about an hour, we talk through everything. We have a big belief that culture drives everything. So we have a very strong culture at OEC. So we talk through what that looks like. There's a lot of service projects we do for the community. And so I go through everything, how the academics work. And then if that student is interested, then I send them, they would normally come on campus and shadow for a day, but right now that's not an option. So I send them a virtual shadowing experience where they hear from students. They get to see what the college campuses look like, because our students can take college classes on any of the OCC campuses. And then there's an interview process at the very end where students will submit their application. There are some essays, letters of recommendation, transcripts. I look at discipline records. And so that student then interviews with myself and a team of students and my counselor if she's available. And then I make the decision on whether or not I feel like the student is appropriate for the school.
Jennifer Newman with us. She is the head of school at Oakland Early College with us today on the Oakland County Megacast. So what are some of the benefits for students of taking the 13th grade experience, as it's known at Oakland Early College, versus taking an influx of AP classes in 12th grade, or of going full-time to a community college immediately after high school?
So I personally feel the big benefit is actually doing college. So our students will leave with at least 30 college credits. The most I've seen a student walk out with is 87 college credits. But you gain valuable experience on how to do college by actually doing it. So 10th graders have like one college class, and then in 11th grade, we start to layer in a couple more. And so over time, they build to this full-time college experience, instead of leaving high school, being very good at maybe doing AP classes, but then all of a sudden you're this full-time college student, and college works very differently. It's kind of like a cold world a little bit, right? You don't feel good. The professor's like, oh, that's too bad, but you missed your test, right? So all of those first-time learning experiences our students get to do while they're with us so that we can assist them. So like I tell students, if you're gonna send an email to a professor, especially if you're angry, you should probably send it to me first, and I'll read it as if I'm the professor and offer some feedback before you launch it out. And so our students also take a class called Focus. And Focus happens every year. The curriculum changes depending on what grade you're in. And we talk a lot about the art of being a college student. How do you write appropriate emails to your professor? How do you time manage for a college class because it only meets once a week, but you're supposed to study 6 hours outside that class? What does that look like? And so I think one of the huge benefits is that you learn how to do college by doing college. AP classes are amazing. They're very rigorous. There's a lot that you learn about yourself as a student. But when you take a college class, you're doing it authentically. It's kind of like theater. So my background originally is mathematics and theater. And so I feel like it's really important to play the role, get feedback on the role of being a college student before you're just going to do it forever and ever and ever after that.
Time management is so key when you're in college, especially that first year. So what is the cost associated with this?
So we're a public school, so there's no cost to students. So unless they take a class that has something like that's considered a consumable. So for example, I had a student who's at Kalamazoo College right now. He's a pre-med major, and he finished his EMT license and his paramedic license while he was with us, but he had to purchase his uniform, right? Like that's something that he's wearing to work because he works, he drives an ambulance right now while he's going to school. And so he had to purchase some of that gear type stuff for himself. But when it comes to tuition, textbooks, the fees the college charges, we pay for all of that. So it's a completely free experience because we're a public school. So we just put our dollars there instead of, AP tests and things like that. We're paying for college.
This is such a huge cost savings for some of these students who may not realize it, but their parents will realize it. If you can walk away with at least 30 college credits, oh my gosh, that is so huge. So, but are there only certain subject matters that these students can take their classes in, or is it just general studies?
Anything they want to take classes in that OCC offers, they can take classes in. So we literally have students studying everything. So my son, for example, his dad is an engineer and Will is very engineer minded. He gives me permission to tell his story, just so no one is stressed for him right now. But he's very interested in getting a welding certification before he graduates because he realizes that he could, even if he goes to a 4-year, he could still be welding on the side. In the trades, they need people, especially skilled. And so he would walk out and be able to, if he wanted to, launch into a full-time career with benefits right out of high school. So he's an example of a student that is doing something a little bit different, but welding. So we have students studying heating and cooling. We have students that are in general studies. We have students that are, there's an articulation agreement for nursing. We have students studying theater, right, that are going to New York after. So we have students literally studying anything and everything that OCC offers, which is really exciting because OCC offers a lot. They're an amazing institution. They have amazing supports in place. We're very fortunate to partner with Oakland Community College.
Jennifer Newman with us, head of school at Oakland Early College on the Oakland County Megacast. And Jennifer, and this may be a concern for students and parents in any institution that has in-person learning. In the case of an outbreak, what plans are in place at Oakland Early College to prevent additional spread beyond the initial outbreak, should there be one on campus?
Well, fortunately, those are decisions I don't have to make, thank goodness, because that's not where my training is. The state and the county have done a great job of assigning. So every school district has an Oakland County registered nurse that's assigned to that school district. So if a student tests positive, or like right now I have some students that have traveled from out of the country, so they're quarantining for 14 days before they come to school, like all of those decisions are made by that medical team from the county. So if we were to have a student test positive, we would notify and then they would tell us what to do. And it has a lot to do with like contact tracing, how long the student was in a space like less than 6 feet apart from a student. So we have seating charts for everything. We even know where people eat lunch. So we would be able to trace absolutely where that student was physically in the building and who they had contact with. And then the nurse would tell us what to do. So we would follow whatever protocols the nurse tells us. And it's all a case-by-case basis because it just depends on what the situation is.
This is such a great program, and I know that you take applications, so I would assume this semester's already taken. What is the deadline for next semester if someone is listening or watching this and they want to get involved?
So by Thanksgiving is a really good time to make sure we have everything in place because we still have to then apply to the college, like the student has to apply to the college. And the college semester starts right after, like students usually come back from that December break. So they start early January. So we really have to work with the college, especially if a student comes in at semester, of how that's going to look. But we would like to have all our applications in by Thanksgiving is generally how we do that. Every once in a while, we can get a late one in, but the bulk of processing needs to happen by Thanksgiving.
Jennifer Newman with us on the Oakland County Megacast, head of school, Oakland Early College. This is an amazing program. I don't have kids, so it's the first time I'm hearing about it, and I'm like, holy cow, this is incredible. So we covered a lot, but is there anything that you want to add just to let people know that we maybe didn't touch on?
Yes, I would like to add our tagline for this year. So we always have a theme every year when we go back to school, and it's kind of our culture building is all centered around that theme. And this year, our theme is Oakland Early College is more than a school, it's an experience. And so that's one of the reasons we are super excited about being back live with students, because it is really about the experience. It's not just the academics.
That's a good tagline to have. Thank you so much for being with us today. We appreciate your time and all the information that you're sharing.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It was a true pleasure.
She's full of energy as well, isn't she?
Oh,
But
yes.
she's excited. She's excited about her job. She's excited about being able to help the kids, because this is an amazing program, Tyler, for kids to get a jump start on their college education or just their post high school education. And like she said, you could come out with a trade skill that you need and 30 college credits. That is a huge, huge saving. So we appreciate Jennifer Newman with us on the Oakland County Megacast. And when we come back, we are going to wrap things up with the West Bloomfield Fire Department Chief Greg Flynn. They are also our Facebook partner for the day, and we appreciate that. We'll be right back here on the Oakland County Megacast.
Michigan, the coronavirus pandemic has put us all to the test. And now it's time to put COVID-19 to the test. As we move forward, testing will be critical. We encourage anyone who has reason to get tested to do so, those with symptoms and those without. If you are leaving home and going back to work, get tested. If you think you may have COVID-19 or you've been exposed recently through family, friends, or coworkers, get tested. Our test locator tool can help you find the right testing site that fits your needs. Even if you're looking for easy access with no cost, no prescription, and no appointment necessary, we've got you covered. Help Michigan move forward, not backward. To find a testing site or learn more, visit michigan.gov/coronavirus test. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Michigan, we still need to stay careful because we don't want to go backwards, back to where we started. So keep standing 6 feet apart, keep wearing a mask in public, and if you have symptoms, talk to a healthcare provider about getting tested. To move forward, let's all do our part. So stay careful. Michigan.gov/coronavirus.
Is the Oakland County Megacast. I'm Ronnie Dahl alongside Tyler Keith. You're watching and listening to us on Civic Center TV, Birmingham Area Municipal Access. You can catch us on the radio, 89.3 Lakes FM and 88.1 FM The Biff. And today you can also catch us on the West Bloomfield Fire Department's Facebook page. They have a lot of followers over there, so we appreciate you allowing us to stream along as we work to bring you the latest information on COVID-19 and interesting interviews with newsmakers throughout Oakland County and the state of Michigan. And our next guest, Greg Flynn, Chief of the West Bloomfield Fire Department. It is always a pleasure to have you with us on the Oakland County Megacast.
Ronnie and Tyler, hello. It's been a little while, so good to be speaking with you.
Usually we see you with the backdrop of the fire department behind you.
I know. I feel like that's such a letdown now. Whenever you're in my boring office, and I even have to close the blinds to try to help get the light right for the camera. So, it couldn't be more blah than what is behind me. So I apologize.
You know what? Tyler is a person with many talents. Maybe we can send him over there and paint your backdrop red.
There we go.
Tyler's like, no.
Yeah, that's what I need. Another task.
Chief, thanks for being with us. So give us some updates. Anything new going on over there with the fire department? I know we want to talk about suicide prevention, but before we jump into that, it's kind of a heavy topic. Anything new over there with the fire department that you want to share with us?
Well, I really just want to really compliment everyone on their attention to all the disease mitigation things that have gotten so much discussion since early March. And I really think that these best practices are really becoming sustainable behaviors. I love to hear people have to acknowledge that they're washing their hands often, something that we kind of took as an assumption that people were doing. Now that we're doing more of that, you're seeing hand sanitizer places, that social and physical distancing is taking place. So, great job. And how do we know that? We know that because when we look at our progress report and we look at those numbers, that we're keeping those numbers down. And it's not a report card. We're not done. These are just updates. And we're always vulnerable to something maybe going a direction we don't want it to. But right now, I think we're heading in a really good direction.
So, Chief, I know, like you said, that you get the progress reports, and one of the things before your staff members are sent out to any type of scene, they try to get information, the dispatchers try to get information about whether or not the person that they're going to treat could have possibly been exposed to COVID-19. What are those numbers looking like?
So those numbers remain low. We've seen the reports come through, so our reports are retrospective. So I look at yesterday's numbers, and we'll see numbers come through as zeros. And I think we've had one recently that maybe was as high as 6. So that, and remember, that is just, they screen for the potential of COVID. So really anybody suffering from respiratory distress, or if they had a fever, even unrelated to COVID, they're going to pop positive for our screening. And really all that's doing is giving our pre-hospital care providers, our firefighter paramedics, a little bit more of a heads up. They are critical thinkers. They are professionals. They're on the spot with this, and they're doing a great job. I couldn't compliment them enough.
Education is key, and we are all learning a lot about this virus and so much more as we continue in going into 6 months of this pandemic. Shifting focus right now, and one of the reasons we're having you on is to talk about a very heavy topic, but a very serious topic that needs to be discussed. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death here in the U.S., and I know that the West Bloomfield Fire Department, this is a subject that is close to your heart, and your department is launching a suicide prevention campaign this month. Tell us a little bit about the program and why it means so much.
So our department did experience a death by suicide with one of our members, and that makes it, well, for years, clearly, as suicide and intentional death being that 10th leading cause of death, we've seen that as pre-hospital care providers over our careers. So very, aware of it, but clearly, like so many people, have that personal interaction or that personal experience where a loved one, a family member, someone close to them has died by suicide. There is a stigma. There's a stigma even how we were to talk about it. If we were to talk about cardiac disease, I think the topic may not sound as heavy. And that's not a criticism of how you introduced it. That's a reflection of how we are as a society, as a community. That we struggle a bit discussing the pain and the circumstances surrounding somebody that's making that decision that they want to take their own life.
So tell us a little bit about your campaign. What are you guys going to be doing to bring awareness to this issue?
Well, one of the big things is just starting these community conversations. We know that while suicide hits the demographic of white males between the ages of 45 to 55 in there at high risk, we know that it goes across all races, all genders, all socioeconomic stratificate, all of that. It goes into cities, it goes into rural communities. And we want to start the conversation. All of our firefighters are going to be wearing a shirt similar to this. On the back of the shirt, it has a suicide prevention message on the back. And what's unique about these shirts, and it's not just West Bloomfield. West Bloomfield is joining departments across the state of Michigan, and we have our state with the yellow suicide prevention awareness ribbon there. Over 3,000 shirts have gone out to local departments and fire department supporters to bring this awareness. To start the conversation, to let people know that it's okay to talk about it. It's okay that if you have depression and you're seeing somebody and talking about that and processing that, that's okay. No different than monitoring your blood pressure or your sugar. We know that the body both emotionally and physically. Those two things need to work well together. And that's okay. I've talked to someone, and I don't have a problem sharing that, there are things in the job that get stressful, and it's nice to go talk to somebody that will just hear you out and help you process and straighten out some of those pathways and get you thinking clearly again. And we shouldn't have a stigma about that, and it should be okay to say, hey, I went and talked to somebody, and I feel better, and they're helping me.
Chief Greg Flynn with us from the West Bloomfield Fire Department on the Oakland County Megacast today. The fire department, also our Facebook partner, and we thank all of you watching on their Facebook page for joining us on today's program. So, Chief Flynn, you talk about bringing awareness to the issue of suicide and getting people more involved in spreading the word about prevention, about talking to someone if they're in a tough situation with their mental health. What resources is the fire department pointing people towards as they are continuing on these educational efforts for those that maybe are in a tough spot, or those that see somebody that they care about, someone that they know that is going through a tough time in their life?
Tyler, often I view the role of the fire department in some situations, while clearly when it comes to fire suppression and emergency medical care, we're that primary support. In other areas, we help to fill gaps. So we fill gaps, or we create that bridge to the resource. So if we're able to get somebody to the hospital where they can talk to a social worker and then create a relationship with a therapist, then that'll work. If through our Facebook messaging, we're putting things out where if somebody needed the crisis suicide hotline, then that number is provided, and I'm sure something that you guys will be able to share on your page as well. And it's important to keep in mind, too, that part of the message that we're trying to get across is early intervention. We know that death by suicide is kind of this final outcome, if you will. But before that there were many opportunities that there could have been some type of there may have been opportunities for some type of intervention to take place. So if it's early onset depression or anxiety, or these other, and I'm not a clinician, right? That is not my background, but I'm aware of it, and I'm comfortable having a conversation about it. Just like I'm not an expert in hypertension, and I'm not an expert in diabetes, but I know enough about it to know that I need to go see someone that's an expert to help me get on that correct path so I can live a long and healthy and, very enjoyable life.
Chief Flynn with us, the West Bloomfield Fire Department on the Oakland County Megacast. The Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255, 273-8255 for anyone who is out there who may be thinking that they need to just have a conversation with someone. And how did your team handle it post-suicide of one of your members? Because guilt is such a heavy thing. And so what areas did you have to change and have to address to try to help them through surviving this as well?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. So much of the processing that takes place as all of us go through that relationship with that loved one, that individual, that close friend of ours, has an influence with that individual side of it for you and how you're going to process. So as an employer, that is a very difficult thing. I struggle from time to time as the leader of an organization to try to connect individually with each person and meet them right where their needs are. A nearly 100-person department, that's challenging. Now, I'm not trying to say I'm shirking that responsibility or I don't want to do it. I'm just underscoring the need, or that saying, it takes a village. We had to come together. We leaned on our chaplain, Tim Holzerland, to really come in and give us some coaching in how to interact with people. We followed up after the fact, days, weeks, months, and even to this day, we still talk about Lieutenant Hiltner and celebrate who he was and the service that he provided to our communities served by the WBFD. And I think that's all part of it. I don't think we're done. I think, I know, speaking for myself, I'm not. I still have reflect back on that relationship, and I definitely look forward to what steps can I take to help prevent that. What could could I have done, could our whole team here have done to do a better job? But we need to be careful that we don't dwell on that too much, that, that guilt that you spoke of, Ronnie, we don't want that to overwhelm us and give us kind of this analysis paralysis where we're focusing so much time back there that we're not looking forward and trying to apply some of those simple things that we may have been able to change and look for signs and symptoms like not resting well, unusual sleep patterns, giving things away, kind of a change in interaction with people, things that you would commonly see on risk factors or signs of a person that may be thinking of harming themselves.
Yeah, when you can't look back, one of the things is to learn from previous experiences. And I think there is such people don't want to talk about that, even more so in your profession or law enforcement or amongst healthcare workers right now, where there is an increase of suicide following COVID and some of the things that some of the first responders have had to experience. So removing that stigmatism that comes with even talking about mental health is such an important part of this. And to your members and the people of the community, it's a great service that you're providing, and just saying it's okay to talk about it.
And that really is the first step. Often there's a good video on YouTube that you can look up. It's called The Black Dog, and it talks about depression and this kind of life of having this black dog that follows you. And it really is a powerful video to watch, and I would encourage viewers to look that up and just take a moment when you have some time to yourself to watch it and really reflect on the video itself and what it's speaking to you about, and saying, get the help, because there's so much out there to enjoy. Now, that is easy for me to say, and I am oversimplifying the complexity of behavioral and emotional health issues. You've had some great professionals on this show that have the background and could go more into the science. Our mission, what we're hoping to do over this month of September, is just to get people to talk about it, to rephrase things. Instead of saying somebody committed suicide, that someone died by suicide, we put that committed next to it like it's this, like this crime, if you will. Like you don't commit a heart attack, you don't commit a stroke, but those are ways of dying too. And death by suicide is another way. In fact, as we said, it's the 10th leading cause in the United States. So how we talk about it, how we phrase it, how we say to others that have how we engage with them that have lost a loved one to death by suicide, that's difficult. And, I can't say exactly what that looks like. What I know is I just want to share with someone that I care about them, and that we celebrate that person that they lost, because clearly they were hurting. You think about it, Tyler and Ronnie, every single day, we focus on feeding ourselves to stay alive and to breathe and do other things to stay alive. To go that direction of ending that life, that's a huge hurdle for someone to get over, and it's going to take it's a lot of pain and things that they're working through to make that decision. And they get often characterized as weak, and I think that's a mischaracterization of those individuals that have arrived at that is their final decision.
Has your department seen a rise in people that have either committed or who have either died by suicide? See, I just caught myself right there. So it's an important conversation that we're having right now, but that have attempted as well during this time.
So our medics will code their impression of what was happening. It's important to realize that we're not therapists. So the important diagnosis is probably a more important diagnosis as we talk about this as a disease, as a illness, or as a way of dying, is that clinical follow-up that's going to take place at the hospital to really understand why that person arrived at that decision. Some things are accidental in the true sense. There can be an accidental overdose where someone just inadvertently took too much of a medication, and that is different than a death by suicide, an intentional ending of your life. So I don't have a number here to say, here's what it is in West Bloomfield, although I'm sure we could dig around and probably find things that start to narrow it down by the county. I'm very confident that Oakland County Health would have some of those numbers. But we know it's prevalent because it is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States.
healing starts with conversation, and we appreciate and thank you for taking on this tough topic there in the West Bloomfield Fire Department.
Well, and often I get to be the face of the department, but I want to share with you that it truly is the men and the women that are out there in the stations right now, every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that you don't get to see and you don't necessarily get to talk to. They're the ones who really are doing that. I'm, again, in this boring office with lots of paper and stuff around me, the people that are really making that impact. When you call 911, the paramedic that walks through that door, the paramedic that's holding your hand on the way to the hospital and saying, I care about you, they're the real heroes out there. And I want to make sure that out of all these interviews, that's where the spotlight is, because they are the ones that really make a difference to the residents out there. They're the ones that are going to be there at the end of that 911 call and coming through that door.
West Bloomfield Fire Chief Greg Flynn, thank you for being with us on the Oakland County Megacast. We ran over just a little bit, so I apologize for that. 1-800-273-8255, the National Suicide Hotline. Make the phone call if you need help. For all of us here at Civic Center TV, thank you for watching and listening to the Oakland County Megacast.